Okay, what we're thinking of as aliens are uh, they're extra dimensional beings that an earlier precursor of the space program made contact with. They are not what they claim to be. They have infiltrated a lot of aspects of the military establishment, particularly the Area 51. The disasters that are coming, the military, the government knows about them, and there's a lot of safe areas in this world that they could begin moving the population to now, Art.
What you just listened to was a real phone call that happened on September 11th, 1997. For years, there's been controversy over whether it was real or false and who the caller really was. Today, we'll get into the story being told on the call. For background context, the famous radio broadcaster Art Bell opened the phone lines for Area 51 employees to call into his show Coast to Coast AM. He wanted to hear right from them what their experiences were at Area 51. What nobody expected was a panicked-sounding man call in whose voice kept breaking, describing his warnings after working in the shadowy area rumored to be covering up alien encounters and UFOs. Over the years, it became one of the most, if not the most famous otherworldly phone call in history. The question we've all had since that call is, was any of it real? So today, John and I will share the timeline of events that happened, the strange details around the follow-up call that came later, the return of the original caller, and then what John's team saw when they remote viewed the whole thing. Help us decide if the information was real, a hoax, or part of a larger cover-up of interdimensional visitors to our planet that's just too hard to believe. Join me, Rob Counts, and John Vivanco for a metaphysical show that's out of this world.
Are you listening to our Metaphysical podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else? You know, that 5-star rating and review, it really, really helps us reach more people, and we really appreciate when you do that. So one thing you also have to remember, you got to like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, and Facebook.
John, how you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Great.
I'm loving this subject. It's a really crazy one.
It's the coolest phone call ever made into a show.
From
literally.
the legend of high strangeness, UFO, paranormal radio. From the legend, yeah.
Yeah, Art Bell. So yeah, for those of you guys that don't know Art Bell had a radio show that was a really strong radio show in the 90s, right? That was when it was at its most popular, I think.
Yeah, 90s, early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, every day it was fun on there. I mean, every single day there's a whole cast of people that were on the Art Bell show, and they entertained people for years with metaphysical topics of all sorts. I'm sure some of them being true and some of them being a stretch, because unfortunately, that's how this stuff goes. I mean, there's grandiose claims being made all the time, and you kind of have to do the research to find out what's true and what's not and what really happened. A lot of times, some things you think are going to be some bizarre otherworldly event, and it's actually just totally, biological or something, or just not anything that's amazing.
Right.
So, John, because you were on the Art Bell from time to time, you'd remote view every once in a while on there, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Art Bell basically retired, and immediately upon retirement, he brought in a different host for Midnight in the Desert, his radio show. He had to change. He left Coast to Coast. George Nuri took that over. He went, and I don't know, he may have had other iterations of show names. until he got to Midnight in the Desert. But that's when he retired himself from that show. But then he brought in a person named Heather Wade in order to continue with that show. So once Heather Wade took over that show, I became the resident remote viewer for the show, and would go on there on a regular basis talking about remote viewing stuff. And this was in the 2017, 18, 19.
Really?
Like, yeah, that whole time frame right there. Art was alive. He was still directing the show and direction it was going to go, while she hosted everything. And so I would go on there on a regular basis and do that.
Are they still doing the show now, or
The show still goes on, but I think I don't know where they're playing it. I haven't paid attention to it in a long time. I mean, in the late 90s, you have to remember, like, there was really not much of an internet. I mean,
No.
there was an internet, but it's not like it is now. But the internet was even more Wild West and free back then than it is now, because you have major people right now that are squeezing information into their own MK Ultra direction, right? So Art Bell, like, I would listen to that every night, and it would be this late night thing, and you're sitting there. You've got a blanket over your head. It's freaky. It's dark out. He's got these guests on. He's got callers. They're talking about aliens abducting people. They're talking about weird time travel experiments. They're talking about horrible cryptids. And it was really the first time, I think, that somebody had taken all of that kind of information and consolidated it down into this amazingly entertaining construct that came over the radio, right?
Yeah.
They're just people weren't so they like, think how people are today compared to back then. We were getting the internet. We didn't have smartphones yet, but people now will spend 3 seconds to 10 seconds on something and they will jump to the next thing. Back then, the focus was a little bit different. And so that was the perfect time frame to be like moving these stories through people's minds, because they would sit there with rapt attention and listen, and literally most of the time believe everything that came out of it, right? So that was an amazing time. I will tell you, that was an amazing time. People today, my friends today, still talk about these Art Bell shows from the 1990s.
Yeah.
It's crazy. He was the god of this, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I remember that time really well. You remember how popular the Howard Stern show was during the late 90s. And it was like, that was really like, that was when radio was king. I mean, now we've got podcasting and stuff. And so, and we've got a lot of like more professional presentations and things, but there's something about the delivery method of some of these broadcasts that you are irreplaceable. It's sort of like, now the technology has gotten so good, people are shooting 90 frames per second, something like this, right? And when you look at that film quality, it almost feels soap opera-ish. Like, something about the original film, 24 frames per second, and the film grain is what made you enter into a space that was almost irreplaceable. And with radio and some of the distortion,
that's a really, really interesting correlation.
Yeah. With radio and the way that the distortion of the radio, you have professional audio going out, but then the radio itself is doing something to that voice that makes it just so much more engaging somehow.
From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening or good morning, as the case may be, across all these many, many prolific time zones.
You can't top that. I don't. And so Art Bell doing this in this like 9 p.m. to 12 a.m. thing on the East Coast, right? I mean, it was. How do you? We need this back. is what
You
we need.
can't
Somebody needs to
replicate
do
it
this
now.
again.
Like,
What?
you can't replicate that. I just
I
don't know if
know.
you can.
I know.
It was a slice of time where everything was changing, and yet nobody had done anything like that before. And he had the perfect delivery on everything. The
Yeah.
perfect delivery on everything.
Yeah, he really was a say what you want, whether you believe a lot of the stuff that was on there or not. But this guy was there was no way anyone could deliver that stuff. You can't have another show because Art Bell wouldn't be there. And just to have it every day and then all of the different characters on the show that kind of added in that you became familiar with, they were almost a part of your family. You might not even be sure what these people look like.
He had these segments where he said, the line is open to alien abductees, or the line's open to Area 51 employees, or whatever. So he had these cool little segments that he would run. But, those are the areas that you really have to be careful
Yeah.
in believing, right?
The disasters that are coming, the military, I'm sorry, the government knows about them.
Yeah, it was during when the guy was talking about this whole alien thing taking over and disasters coming, it started to cut out. So the show started to cut out. His voice cuts out, and then everything goes completely black for, I don't know, a couple minutes. And then the music starts again, like the theme music starts, and Art Bell comes back on and says, "Our show went off the air, and I don't know why."
And the entire transmitting system by satellite went down here, and we were notified we were off the air. And it would appear to be from this end.
And from there on, he was trying to figure out why it went off the air. And so he claimed that his satellite feed went down. And so that was like this other part of it that really convinced people that some aspect of this has to be true.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure everyone was talking about it the next day.
Well, they're still
they
talking
slept.
about it.
They are still talking about it. I mean, these clips of this caller are still, circulating around TikTok and Instagram and all. That's what reminded me of this, actually, is I saw a clip on it and I was like, hey, we should have a show on this, because so many people don't really know what's really going on with it, and the story behind it, which I think is even more important than meaning the story that the Area 51 caller was relaying to Art. Yeah.
Right. Because I think we may have two different things happening here, ultimately. The story,
yes,
and how the story was brought into the show. I think these are two different things.
Yes. One of the things that has confused everyone for years is that there was a second call 1 week later by a guy named Brian, who claimed to be the caller.
Right. He claimed that he was responsible for it, that he made the call and he was hoaxing. He said, I made a hoax on you. I'm sorry.
Everybody, I am the Area 51 caller.
You claim you're the Area 51?
I am the man.
First off, why? Okay, so let's say you did make a hoax. Why would you call back and say you did the hoax?
Yeah, what was his motivation for calling back? This right away kind of smells a little bit funny, right?
That didn't make any sense to me at all. Come on. That didn't make any sense to me. Why someone would do that?
Yeah, so originally the guy kind of claimed that he was calling back to admit that it was just theater. But then the cutting out of the clip was real. And he'd planned to do more, but he got really freaked out by the satellite cutting out. So even though it was theater, the satellite cut out during his delivery, and it freaked him out so much, and then he just was calling back to admit and confirm all of this, something to that degree.
Right.
Which, again, doesn't really make too much sense. Art kind of at that time had him prove that it was him by trying to do the voice again. And then there's been a lot of, I think, controversy over whether this was the guy or not. And you kind of have to hear it to judge for yourself whether this was the guy. I mean, yeah, actually, could we play that?
The East of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Hi, Art. This is Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Hello. You didn't disconnect me before, did you?
Were you on earlier tonight?
No, not, towards the end of the last hour, you said, East of the Rockies, you're on the air, and your voice was immediately replaced by the operator saying, your party has not connected.
Oh, well, see, as you can now tell, I don't screen calls. So
Right.
What happened, obviously, was that I answered the phone just at the very instant that you had been ringing as long as they were going to let you ring.
Yeah.
And so that occurs, obviously, sometimes I go to a line and it's dead and nobody's there, and that's what's happened. You know, we're on the cusp there. Anyway, I'm glad you made it back through.
Yeah, you got all my paranoia buttons running. I always get very nervous when I call you. I'm Brian. I hung up on you last week.
I see.
And I just figured, damn the torpedoes. I'll just do this and let the chips fall where they will.
All right.
Everybody, I am the Area 51 caller. That's my statement, and let you or whatever tear it apart.
You claim you're the Area 51 caller?
I am the man.
How do you account for the fact, Area 51 caller,
Okay.
that part of the way through your spiel, the satellite went down?
I have no idea, and it scared the heebie-jeebies out of me that night. I've called a number of times on your specialty line nights doing different, kind of wacky characters, and that's all that one was supposed to be. And if the call had been completed, it would have been ancient history by now.
Has it occurred to you, as Barbara Marx Hubbard suggested tonight, that perhaps, if you're really what you say you are, you created the reality of the rest of the situation and took down my satellite?
That scares the heebie-jeebies out of me because it means that what I was saying was somehow correct, and it was fabrication, kind of
creating a reality.
Yeah, if that was the case, I humbly apologize to you because I love your show, and the last thing I would ever want to do is
knock me off the air.
What can I do to prove my claim here?
Well, I guess you could give us a little of what you gave us then so that we could hear it and know it to be you.
Are you sure you want me to do that, Art?
I'm positive.
Don't, Art, please. I don't want you to ask me to do this. If I start doing that guy,
You're right about that. Now, let's just take that little sample that you just gave us so that we don't alter some sort of hard little reality here at the end of the program, and we'll let the callers be the judge.
Okay.
All right?
I thank you for this opportunity. This has just been driving me bananas for months, and I didn't know what you wanted me to do. I knew it was very difficult for me to prove to you. But I just thank you for your patience in dealing with me up to this time.
All right, it's quite all right. Thank you. Fritz in Phoenix, as a matter of fact, called and said, "Oh yes, that's him."
All right,
Okay,
so
yeah.
right off the bat on this, there's a couple things. He said at the end. Okay, so this is a week after, right? This is a week after the that show aired and the satellite went down, supposedly, right? So at the end, he says, "This has been driving me crazy for the last couple months."
Okay. What does that mean?
I don't know what that means. It's just like I'm looking for discrepancies. The other thing that I really, really notice is that if you go back to the original caller, there was emotion behind it. Emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The voices sound a little bit similar, not all the way to me. But the emotion is 100% not there. like on the vibrational frequency side on this guy, right? So that's what I noticed right off the bat, because I can feel the energy behind it. He sounds a little bit like him. He's probably a good voice mimicker, right? That's what I would think across the top. Like if I hearing that radio program, this specific one way back when, I would have thought the same thing. Like,
A former employee.
Former employee.
I was let go on a medical discharge about a week ago, and I've kind of been running across the country. Oh man, I don't know where to start. They're gonna they'll triangulate on this position really soon.
it kind of sounds like him. He's a good mimicker. I've had friends who can mimic just about anybody's voice, but they don't have the emotion behind that original voice. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's kind of like listening to AI do someone's voice, like Joe Rogan's or something, and it presents information, and you're like, that is so not Joe Rogan. You can just tell.
Right. And then I also feel like Art Bell. If you feel Art Bell behind the original vibration when this guy comes on. So Art Bell really dumped this guy off the phone really fast too. He stopped him really quickly from continuing with the call, right? With the recreation. Stopped him really fast, then moved him off the call as fast as he could. The guy also said, "I thank you for this opportunity," thanking him for the opportunity, which was a weird thing to say as well. Just off the bat, like feeling Art Bell, like Art Bell's energy when this guy first started saying it, I could feel Art Bell like pull back and squeeze up inside of himself. Right? Could you feel that? Like I could feel that stuff going on in people. Like he's like, wait a second. No, there was something about nope inside of him. Right? And then he got rid of him really quick.
Yes.
So I'm just noticing these things, right? That none of it was right. None of it felt right.
Well, the guy was over excited too.
He was over excited.
And I just realized this. He was like, "Oh, you hung up on me."
Right.
And like, and he was like, "Oh," and he tried to explain it away, Art, but what if he actually really hung up on the guy to try to get rid of him? Or somebody did that.
Who knows? Yeah.
There was a few weird things there, and then that excitement behind his voice of wanting to be on the air and wanting this opportunity,
right,
felt like a clout chaser to me. The thing that I'm having a hard time understanding is there were certain parts of this guy's voice that sounded very similar to the original caller, and then certain parts that didn't line up really. And that could just be, when you're voice acting or you're acting in general.
Or you're a comic book artist sitting there drawing things and putting on the voices of the people you've heard in movies. This is going to like develop over time. He's a comic book artist.
Yes.
He's sitting there like drawing pictures of Superman, Batman, and he's going, "You are blah, blah." You know what I'm saying? I mean, literally, that's what you do. Like I had a friend who I went to art school with, and he used to love comics, and he would kind of like draw a lot of that in that style sometimes. And literally, he could mimic anybody's voice. Anybody's voice. It didn't matter who it was. And he was so good at it, and he would crack me up for hours. I mean, being creative and I don't know, there's a lot here to suggest just on the surface that wasn't the original caller.
Well, another strange thing, I mean, and who put this guy up to this too? If Art Bell was that uncomfortable, who put this guy up to it? Because the fact that he was like, this has been driving me crazy for months. It almost felt like this guy's been trying to call in for months and just get in for any reason.
The Area 51 caller thing. Yeah, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. That's strange.
Yeah, it's all strange. Okay, I think Art was following it and like knowing he, was kind of would be blowing it, claiming it was a hoax or his hoax specifically, because things weren't the way he was presenting, the discrepancies, sort of like it, not 100%, and no emotion behind it. I think Art Bell was, like,
Another thing too is what's weird is this. I felt very uncomfortable. I'm just trying to put my finger on how I was feeling while I was listening to this,
yeah,
and it started making me feel really uncomfortable when Art started saying, "Well, oh, so you're the Area 51 caller."
Mm,
The guy basically chimes in and says, I am the man," right? And then he starts going through, how do you account for the fact, Area 51 caller, that part of the way through your spiel, the satellite went down.
right.
I have no idea, and it scared the heebie-jeebies out of me, that guy said, right? Um, and yes, he repeated that. That scares the heebie-jeebies out of me because it means that what I was saying was somehow correct and it was fabrication, kind of creating, and then Art kind of comes in and says creating a reality. That whole part felt weak. I don't know.
Right,
I'm struggling to find the right word to describe it, but just kind of weird to me, awkward,
right,
almost as
right.
if Art was trying to find a way to make it
Make it work. Yeah,
make it work somehow.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like he had
Right.
created a reality and the satellite. I don't know, and I don't even know what does that mean exactly. I don't know, but it
Well,
was
what it means is that what he means by that is that somebody called in to hoax this, but the powers that be were listening and going, "This is too real. We don't know who this guy is. We
okay.
just need to shut him down now." Right? Which, I don't know. No, 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 no. See, here's the thing. One thing you have to understand is that, well, you know this. I'm not saying you, just in general, like, we all have to understand that UFO alien stuff is of the highest classification, especially when it gets to Area 51. It gets to all this stuff. We can talk to our heart's content about that stuff. Aliens in Area 51, the end of the world, the aliens helping bring about the end of the world, and we will not get harassed. What have I gotten harassed on before? I've gotten harassed and warned on things that cross over into the boundary of classified, more mundane technology.
National security,
That's where
right?
I get screwed. That's where anybody in this business gets screwed. If you're talking about that stuff that they were talking about, nobody's going to care. They're not going to take you off the air, because taking you off the air means that it's verifying something here, right? They don't do that. They're not going to do that.
Yeah, it is. It's when you get close to those national security threats that are
Yes.
getting too close to technology that they're using now or that they need now or that are just classified for different reasons.
Right.
I think, anti-gravity stuff that can happen with stuff that's screwing with energies, right?
Right.
You and I have talked about this before.
You can
Those
talk
things.
about it if you're making
Mhm.
it. That's one thing. There are certain things you can't talk about. Still, even, I mean, if you start talking about things that are dovetailing into literal, like, conventional classified stuff, and you're remote viewing it and you're bringing that information out, and that information is correct, you're going to get hammered. You will get warned. This has happened to me in the past and people that I know. So when you go into this realm, talking about aliens, Area 51, they want the cities to be destroyed, blah, 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 blah. They're not going to mess with you on that. Whether that's true or not, they're just not going to mess with you.
Yeah, okay,
So
so this guy did try to call in repeatedly.
it
He
seems that
tried
way, right?
he tried to first be a vampire when Art Bell called for vampires to call in. So this guy was an Art Bell creeper, whoever it was, whether it was the
Right,
initial guy or not, right?
right.
And maybe that's why there was a bit of annoyance in his voice, is that this guy they've been dealing with. I mean, that can
Right. He
happen.
seemed
It's like,
annoyed. He was annoyed. He was clearly annoyed with this guy. Yeah,
yeah, but
right,
masking it really carefully on air if he was, you know.
right, right. But you can feel his
Yeah,
energy, though. I mean, that's the thing, that's the one thing that I always try to step back and feel the energy behind people rather than what their demeanor on the surface is. Because everybody's an actor to a certain degree. You have to feel
that's
their energy.
hmm, that is an interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
So the story doesn't really end here. of course, we can ask the question, was this the same caller? But I don't think we're going to find that information until we start revealing some of this remote viewing data. But let's keep going through the story here. So this isn't where it ends, though. 17 years later, on the Fade to Black radio show with Jimmy Church, a guy also called in claiming to be this gentleman. Let's listen to this clip right now and see what we think of the voice and everything.
Oh, so this is supposedly Brian again? Okay, all right.
Or the first caller. I mean, this is where it gets weird. Is like there are people between then and now claiming to be this guy, and there was that second caller claiming to be him. But then who is this guy? I mean, this is kind of what we're trying to put together right now.
Okay.
Yeah, Jimmy. I'm wow, I can't believe I'm making this call. It's been 17 years. There's a lot of hoopla on the radio, all these years on the internet, all the crazy. 17 years ago, there was a call to the Art Bell program. A man, he called and he claimed to have knowledge of Area 51, and it resulted in a pretty big catastrophe. I don't know, some call it radio history. I just know I've been living a nightmare ever since then.
Calm down. It's okay. Where are you calling from?
I have fallen for that trick once. I am not going to tell you where I'm calling from. It's only going to be a matter of time before they're going to be able to use. It's like the technology has advanced. 17 years. Oh, I'm sorry. 17 years. And 17 years. And so, like, yeah, here I am. And yeah, I'm calling your show, and I know I can tell you what took the satellite down.
When are you talking about back with Art Bell?
Yes, Area 51. Okay.
Okay. All right. Take a deep breath, my brother.
All right.
What happened?
There was truth back then, and there was this crazy guy in Philadelphia, and he called out of his parents' basement because Art Bell put on a program saying, Area 51 callers, pull on in. And this guy who had nothing to do with Area 51, he called in and he put on this show and he said these words, and next thing you know, he said whatever he said, and a satellite went out, and his life has been a living hell since then.
What brought the satellite down?
I don't know. I don't know. He said things at the time about Area 51 and that there was a precursor and to NASA and that what the United States government is in contact with is not alien beings. They are beings from another world. They're extra dimensional, and no one seems to understand that.
I listen. You're yelling. Just calm down. Calm down.
I know what I sound like. It's been hard.
Are you there? Something. Hang on. My computer, my mouse is acting funny. Hang on. What was that? Bring that call. What?
He's just
doing the same thing.
I was gonna say, if Jimmy Church, I mean, it almost sounds like he's trying to recreate
He was.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, Jimmy and I just did this to, commemorate Art Bell, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Yeah.
I was gonna say the only difference between the first caller and the second was probably a little bit of mental illness, but it was over. I mean, what did you think of that, John?
I don't feel the same energy. The same energy is not there, and it's like, it's not really. Doesn't really hit me in any way at all. Actually, I don't know what to say. I just don't feel the same energy. It's not the same energy as that original.
Did it feel like you were listening to overacting?
There was that for sure. Yeah, absolutely overacting. Yeah, yeah, and you can tell that. Well, I mean, obviously, this whole thing was a little theater event that Jimmy and this guy created for his show, and Jimmy was really like if somebody wasn't convinced, at least in this beginning part of theirs, that the guy was making all this stuff up, all you had to do was listen to Jimmy, because Jimmy was fully scripted, right?
Right.
You
Right.
can just tell.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
anyway, they did come on in a little bit and admit, yeah, we just were messing around. We wanted to bring the Area 51 caller back, as a commemoration to Art Bell and what he did so long ago. So the guy's still, living off the fuel, or feeling the fuel of that as something important that he claims to have done.
This
Which is
guy,
weird.
Brian.
Yeah.
So the question is this the original guy or not?
Well, that's the question, right? So what do we do in remote viewing? When we look at things in remote viewing, when somebody makes a claim, for instance, there was a guy. This is probably during in the 1990s. There was a guy who claimed that he was out walking through the forest, and an alien type being appeared, and he had a fight with it. He killed it. I think he said it killed his dog. He like killed it with a stick, or stabbed it with a stick or something. I don't remember exactly how it went down. And then he took that alien, put it into his like meat freezer for hunting or something.
What?
Yeah. And no, this was like big news. I mean, he would go on Art Bell too. Like, this was like big news. He wrote a book about it. He would go on television shows. I think he's still like talking about it to this day. Anyway, he said that government came and took it like within a day. Like they found out somehow, and they came and they took the alien within a day, and he's got no proof, but this is his story, right? So one thing that we do is we look at what the subject was doing, what the person or people were doing at the moment they claim this happened, right? That's one way that we can verify. Then we also look at their intentions for telling the story.
Right.
So in this particular case, because everybody was like going, wow, these days it's more like nobody really believes you anymore. But back then in the 90s, because of Art Bell and all this stuff, it's like people would take people's stories more at, word of mouth, and it'd be like, okay, oh yeah, all right, well, wow, that's an interesting story. We probably believe you,
Mm-hmm.
So looking at that, during the time period that he claimed this happened, we have him like in like Vegas or a casino type area, in a hot tub with another friend, or like at least one other friend, and they're drinking and concocting a story, making a story up in order to make some money or have some fun, right? So, and then we have multiple viewers on it. They're blind, they don't know what they're viewing. We have different angles that we'll look at, like their motivation, intention, and those line up with what they were discussing and what they were feeling at that moment it supposedly happened. And
Okay, so John, what you're describing right now is this guy Brian.
Oh no, this is somebody else. This is a case that we looked at a long time ago. But what I'm saying, I'm giving you an example of what
I
we
see.
look at and how we come to the truth of things. Now, when we get to Brian, we looked at the same thing. Like what was he doing at the moment that this Area 51 caller called in? Well, I'll tell you, he's not doing anything like calling into a radio show, acting, pretending. Our data has him being alone, very alone, working in some context, maybe like on a house or a garden, just being alone and quiet, and nothing of the sort of what happened on that Art Bell show, bringing emotion forth. Because to remote view that incident as it is, there's a lot of things that come together, high energy points, which are very easy for remote viewers to pick up on and go, oh wow, yeah, this person's like, they're highly emotional, they're charged, they're trying to tell a story, or they're acting, right? Nothing of the sort in any of the data like that. So based on the data that I have on it, I would say no, that original caller was not him, and he was just trying to take advantage of a situation. And I think it reflects in some of the stuff that he was saying, like,
So
thank you for this
Brian,
opportunity. Right,
right
Brian.
now you're talking about Brian, the guy who claimed to be the first caller.
Yeah, yeah. Our data suggests that he was not that first caller. Yeah.
Oh. So what we were saying earlier in the episode, where Art was trying to avoid this guy, is actually probably a thing then, because this wasn't the original guy. I mean, but how would Art
Well, why
know
would
that?
Art avoid him? I mean, that's the next question you have to ask. Why would Art avoid him? What does Art know about it? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, what is
Right.
that? Right. That's the thing though, is like, why would he avoid him? And was he just super excited that the guy the week before called in and he was going to utilize this for a longer time, and this guy was ruining some of his story? Was it, what was it?
Well, I mean, look at what Art has always said about himself. Art has always said, I am a showman. I'm a showman. That's what I am. I'm a showman. Art's a showman. He always was a showman.
He is
Art,
right.
Art only wanted good stories, entertaining stories. That's what Art always wanted. He was a showman. That's why he
All right,
was
all
so
right.
good at this.
All right, so give it to me. What actually happened? What happened here, John? Oh, sorry, John. Then to sum it up for everyone at home, John, where we're at right now, in John giving his information, his remote viewing data, is that this guy Brian, who called in and claimed that he was the Art Bell original caller, was not the original caller.
Yeah, our data suggests that he's not. Yeah.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the next thing that we looked at was that we wanted to know the motivation of the true Area 51 caller.
Okay, what we're thinking of as aliens, Art, they're extra dimensional beings.
For calling Art Bell and telling him the stuff that he told him, right? What was it? What's this guy's motivation? What's his intention? Because if you remote view that, then you can understand if they're telling the truth. If they are like, there's a big problem here, the data's like, there's like, aliens, and like the guy feels there's a big problem. This guy's convinced of something, right? Okay, so that data was basically that this subject was being leveraged by someone else as paying them back, or they have to do them a favor. So this person was being leveraged by another man to do this, because that man had done a favor for them and they had to pay this favor back. Right? The subject did not want to do this, at all. He was very, very reluctant to do it, but he had to pay back this other man. And the story that this subject told, well, the subject knew that it was not true because it was concocted by the other man. They both knew that it was not true, and it was only for the purpose of entertainment. So that was the intention of the subject. He was very reluctant to do it, but he had to pay back this other man to do it, right?
Okay.
Do you know where this is going? Do you know where this is going?
Seems like it. What else did you find?
Well, then we wanted to look at, so that the big thing here is that Art Bell kind of has an out because, hey, the satellite feed went down. And so people will go, well, the guy may have been a hoaxer, right? But that satellite feed went down, right? So why did, there has to be something here because the satellite feed went down. Well, as I said earlier, like, they're not going to come after radio show hosts and people like us for talking about this wacky stuff. They'll only go after things that are more conventionally classified, because once they go after people who are talking about this wacky stuff, they're confirming it. And that, since this is the highest classification, part of the deal with that highest classification is that you don't confirm anything.
Yeah.
You just don't.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So the data on on why the feed malfunctioned, because we want to understand if something broke, like a technical error, a glitch in the system, or it was, somebody that did it, or somebody that created this to stop something from happening. There are a lot of different ideas here in what we want to know. But the basic data talks about a man who is, he's got a big entertainer's badge on himself. He likes to create stories. He doesn't care if these stories are true or false. These stories make him feel powerful. These stories make him feel happy. When he has these stories and he's moving them out into the world, he feels a sense of power over this. Not concerned with anything truthful, and is only interested in entertaining. Yet this entertaining is more for himself and no one else. And the man laughs at the deceptions that he can create around these stories, because people are getting drawn into it, and he basically just feels a big sense of power. And the man had characteristics, physical characteristics, as well as locational characteristics, and timeline characteristics of the one we love so much. So
Okay, so you said there were location characteristics, meaning what exactly?
desert
Like,
environment, desert environment, haunts that he would go to,
so the remote viewers are
physical
getting.
descriptions of this person. Yeah.
Okay, so you're
So
basically getting physical descriptions of someone who fits essentially
yeah,
Art Bell's
yeah,
profile,
right, right, right,
and generally where he lives and stuff like that. Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
okay,
So
yeah.
take it or leave it. This is what remote viewing can be absolutely brutal in the way that it like lays things out, um, because there's no intermediary, there's no game that you have to play with anybody. As far as being like a psychic goes, remote viewing data will just be very blunt, straight to the point, and talk about things in a way that people don't normally talk about things. People will often couch things in this way so other people don't get their feelings hurt. Now you got to understand, like, I love that man. That guy was the best
Art
ever,
Bell, yeah,
right? Yeah, but you also
for
have
sure.
to understand, Art Bell was a showman. He was an
Yeah,
entertainer. That was his first and foremost thing. That's it. That's what he was. Now,
well,
when you get to the guests and whatnot on the show, they had their own agendas, truthful, not truthful. That was something different. But when you got to a lot of these segments that are in between these guests and whatnot, he was a showman, plain and simple.
sure. I think a lot of people these days that are in this kind of I don't want to call it industry, but in the kind of weird information sector of
Yeah.
of podcasting and all of that stuff, I have found that their demise oftentimes comes from wanting to keep things interesting, and nothing interesting is going on at that time.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
it to me, I'm just like, how can you even feel that way? Everything is so weird out there right now. Like, there's always something to talk about.
Right.
But I've seen multiple people, I'm not going to mention any names, just really reach to try to get that next whistleblower or whatever it is, and it ends up
Right.
ruining their reputations entirely. It's not worth it,
Right.
guys. Like, it's not.
Right.
It's a lot
It's
of
not
people
right.
hoaxing out there.
Right. Oh yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of people hoaxing. I mean, and I think what happened here is that the Brian guy was a fly in the ointment for Art Bell on this whole thing. I basically, what happened is that was an unexpected part of this whole scenario for Art to come forward, because this guy saw an opportunity in order to, get something out of it for himself. That's my sense based on the data, and whatnot. I don't think that Art didn't expect that this was coming. This was a different person who originally did it, and I think the whole thing was to keep the question open and to play it out for as long as possible, and maybe have this guy do it again later on in the future. But to close it down after a week, claiming it was a hoax, that was not the original part of the plan.
So Brian is the fly in the ointment.
Yeah, yeah.
I You know, I was thinking about this while you were talking, and as disappointed as I am that this was a hoax, because that guy, original caller, sounded so real. That actually scares me how much how well someone can act.
It's
That
not
just
just
goes to
that,
show you.
right. It's not just that. It is literally the story that he was telling is true.
Well, that's
That's
what's
the other
so
part of it.
that's
The story
yes.
he's telling is true. So to a certain degree here, it doesn't matter if Art Bell was concocting this or not. The story that he was telling is true. We've remote viewed, other viewers have remote viewed aliens in Area 51. There are black ops projects that alien beings completely control with humans with humans together, down when you get to the deeper layers of Area 51, they are like, it's all alien. It's literally all alien. There are aspects of that whole thing. Area 51 is pretty much irrelevant now, but were aspects of that whole thing that are controlled by these aliens. And then you get into what intelligence agencies, what aliens know about the coming destruction, end of the world type stuff. And we've remote viewing data on that. We have the Adam and Eve story, the book that the CIA had classified that talks about the end of the world, the beginning of the world, the end of the world, and how they classified that piece of work and just recently uncensored part of it and then declassified it. Right. So we have all of these indicators across the board with remote viewing, with stuff happening out in the world, that what the guy is saying was truthful from the beginning anyway.
And not to mention the fact that just a couple of weeks ago, we released a show about the New Jersey drones, and the remote viewing data that came back was basically that there were non-human intelligence pieces of technology buried under the earth around New Jersey, that these drones were
in part, at least. Like, this thing is way more complicated than just that, but yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
So, but these things are trying to communicate, and what they're sending back, the information that they're sending back, is all about disaster stuff.
Right.
Tectonic plates moving, any data
water
that
levels,
they can
anything
to help understand what's going on here on Earth. So there is some of that. And then, we've got all of this information. I mean, they are extra dimensional beings. We've been calling them extraterrestrials, which is not necessarily untrue, because even if you're coming from another world or another dimension, you're still probably going to and from some type of planet somewhere.
Yeah.
So extraterrestrial or extra dimensional, I mean, could be the same. And then your information around these disasters is like, I mean, even the pyramids tell us an entire story around the disasters, the 12,000 year periods, the 24,000 year periods. Right. So yeah, what's so bizarre about this is that whole story was concocted, and yet it's still pretty true.
Right. Well, I mean, think about, entertaining is a creative, it's a creative process. And in creative processes, intuition can come forth, right? And when intuition comes forth, it can create things that are truthful, right? So, I mean, that could have been where it came from. But then again, back then, those were all of the stories that were floating around anyway. Why not put it down into a make-believable conspiracy story on top of it all, right? But it is true. It's all true, So
you remember what was this just totally came back into my mind, but there was that back in, what was it, the 20s or the 30s, that one guy who
H.G. Wells. And it was a radio broadcast where it was like
originally
frontline news happening right now, breaking news, aliens are invading, and there's like sound effects and all this stuff, and people are freaking the out because they thought it was true.
Yeah, that's it. It was War of the Worlds. That was 1938 that happened.
Oh, it's quivering, pulsating. The monster or whatever it is can hardly move. It seems weighed down by possibly gravity or something. The thing's rising up now, and the crowd falls back. They've seen plenty. The most extraordinary experience, ladies and gentlemen. I can't find words. Well, I'll pull this microphone with me as I talk. I'll have to stop the description until I can take a new position. Hold on, will you please? I'll be right back in a minute.
I feel like this event was inspired by the original War of the Worlds.
Yeah, right.
It was, I mean, think about it, even though it was only a clip, it was sort of almost the same exact thing as that.
Right.
Is it, this fictional thing that appeared for a moment, freaked everyone out, and then all of a sudden it became clear that it was,
Right.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Well, we'd really like to hear from you guys at home what you think about this entire situation. That original caller had so much emotion. Sometimes, unfortunately, with the remote viewing, we're not always going to find weird stuff. We're actually going to have to debunk some things. And even though we have the most respect that we possibly could for the Art Bell show.
Yeah, don't hate us for that. Like we love the guy. So
why are we so interested in the paranormal? You think?
Well, because Larry, when we're done here on Earth, we all want to know that there's something else out there, don't we? And that is the land of the paranormal. And if there are ghosts, then that's proof that there's life after death, right?
Yeah, he's great. Actually, the show was like probably the best radio show ever, honestly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, though, there are some things out there that are for entertainment purposes only. Not with this show, but with that show. And and this is just how things go.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that we do here is entertaining, but it's all based off of what we've remote viewed, completely 100%. So.
Yeah,
and you can't get around that. And the remote viewing can be absolutely brutal on what it does.
Clearly.
On what it says. So
yeah. And John didn't even share all of it. So
no, I didn't.
So but it disappoints me a little bit to know that people are and have always been hoaxing like this. I mean, John and I are constantly passing videos to one another all the time, trying to figure out whether things are a hoax or not, and all of this stuff. And sometimes it just comes down to the remote viewing data and what we can find there.
There's a lot that we don't talk, that we've never brought to shows because it's been a hoax. So a lot of what we'll do is just try and find things that are like that are like lining up on the side of being completely like truthful from the remote viewing perspective. And those are the things that we're going to present because that's entertaining to people, right? If we brought everything out, we likely wouldn't be entertaining as much, is what it seems like. It seems like that.
I just feel like all the shows out there are just, all they do is debunk stuff all the time. And honestly, I find them insufferably annoying. Like, there is so much interesting stuff going on. And when every single time you just bring it back to this is fake, this is fake, this is fake. And oftentimes those people reporting those things are actually wrong. Some of this stuff that they've claimed to be fake, we've looked into, and it is not fake at all.
Right.
And I think they're doing a disservice to people, and they're creating this bizarre, almost anti-spiritual environment that we all are saturated in now. And we're just not about that.
Right.
Well, but anyway, everybody at home, let us know what you think about this episode, about the content of the episode. Hate to debunk things, but sometimes it just needs to be done. So let us know what you think. And John, do you have anything else?
No, sorry if we crack some eggs here.
Well, you guys, we hope you thought this episode was as out of this world as we did. See you soon.